Hello, Sarah of SEK Handmade here, and welcome back to Swatch and Learn, where we'll be slowing down and swatching with the simple purpose of learning. Welcome to episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about shaping. Let's go.
I want to be real honest with you. Designing my Levana shawl would have been really hard if I hadn't taken the attitude that this was a learning opportunity. And so I'm really honestly pleased to share with you the different shapes that I created with the different increase placements and show you what I learned. Now, you might be saying, Sarah, I'm not a crochet designer. This does not apply to me. But if you want to make garments and finished patterns that fit you really well and you want to customize them, learning and experimenting with shaping is going to be the best thing you can do to make really well-fitting items. So the other thing that it's great for is playing with a lot of hat designs or just tubes that they cinch up at the top. And I personally like a more fitted hat. And so playing with the shaping at the top of a hat is another great thing to give a try. So I tried no less than 7 times to get the shaping of my Levana shawl. And if you read my blog post about the Levana shawl, which I'll link in the description below, you'll find out that it ended up not being the shaping I was aiming for, but a better shaping that I like even more. So I started, let me pull out my first one here. I have several to show you. I started with, all my swatches are tangled here. Oh boy. What I was aiming for was a crescent-shaped shawl. And what I originally thought was, I will just I have knit crescent-shaped shawls, and all I've done in my knitted crescent-shaped shawls was just keep increasing on the edges, and that gave a really nice flat edge at the top and a really nice circular swoop at the bottom. Here's the thing about crochet stitches though. Each type of stitch behaves a little differently when you're increasing and decreasing. So it can be a bit of a challenge. So what I want to show you is that this was my starting edge, and this is, the very beginning. And this was the problem I was having. No matter how many increases I put at this corner edge of my shawl, eventually it just started to droop down. And now you can see this was a cake. I've rewound it, frogged my little swatches and rewound it at least twice, because each time I thought I'm just going to add more and it'll work out. Oh my gosh, my first one I got really far thinking it'll block out, it'll be fine. It was not. It just continued to drift further and further down. So instead of having a nice straight top or even a little curve outwards, it was drooping down, which I knew I did not want. And I also knew that I did not want to rely completely on blocking to force the shape of the shawl. So this shape was created by only increasing at the edges. So you can see across the middle of my swatch, it's super flat. And then at both ends, it droops down. So what I learned from this one was I need more increases in this straight part to push those sides out. So my next one that I tried was this guy. Let's see if I can get him untangled here. So thankfully I have lots of little balls of yarn from other other projects laying around. So once I frogged my first one a couple times, I thought, you know what? This would be a great instructional tool to show you all, like, how does the changing of placement of increases change the shape. So this one, you can see this is my starting tail. So this is my beginning edge. I continued to increase at the corners here, and then I also added an increase, or I guess, excuse me, I continued to increase at the ends, and then I also increased at this kind of corner here. And you can see that that successfully tipped my edges up. Remember, the last ones were kind of drooping down, sadly. This one tipped it up nicely, but it was still not giving me the exact shape I wanted. I was hoping for more of a swooping crescent, whereas that really gave it some sharp corners, right? If this had continued, these would have continued to go up. And so I may come back to this one. I don't hate it, honestly. I love a swooping corner because to me it allows the shawl to kind of naturally wrap around you. So adding an increase helped, but wasn't perfect. So this is my next swatch, and what I did was I decreased the amount of my starting chain, which you can see is that short, and then I placed increases on the edge. I kept increases here. They stayed in the same spot. And you can see what that got me. It got me, I actually really like this shape and this shape. My issue was this. It looks, it looks a little like a stingray. And with his little mouth right here. And again, I contemplated like, oh, maybe that'll block out. But again, I didn't want to lean on blocking. So you can see that the placement of the increases affected the shape of the bottom of the shawl. Maybe I could have blocked that out to a more rounded shape. That would have been okay. But it was just interesting to see what that little change between increases being right on the corner and coming down kind of the center panel made. So again, part of the challenge of this, and let's see if I can show you right here, the way I have a V-stitch here, and the way I was making my increases was just by adding a little fan in there, and that type of increase affected the shape too, because it's not just an increase, it's a fan of an increase. So playing with that was a little different. Increases, like straight increases of stitches that are stitch combinations that are just one stitch, so like a half double crochet, double crochet, treble crochets, all those things that are just one stitch increases, that will change how they affect the shape as well. So very interesting. So for this next one, I went increase crazy. If I didn't have enough increases on the last one, I decided the more increases, the better. And it got me kind of an interesting shape. So I was increasing at the edges. I was increasing, you can kind of see all of my bumps where I increased. I was increasing at the edges here. Then you can see how it bumps out here a little bit. That was another increase. And then I started with an increase in the center, but then moved those increases out. I was trying to not end up with a point in the center because my goal, as I told you in the beginning, was a really crescent shaped shawl. So I wanted a nice smooth edge. And so I worried that putting the increase right in the center and keeping it in the center would end up with a triangular shape. So I started with increasing in the center and then I moved increases outwards, which you can see gave me a really nice circular bottom there. But then this is what bothered me with this shape. You can see that at each place that there's an increase, it kind of bumps out and then scoots back in. Again, maybe could have been helped with blocking, but maybe not. And then these increases, I tipped this direction. So instead of stacking them straight on top of each other, I started going to the side in hopes of kind of pushing outwards. And I think the pushing outwards was successful. The smooth shape was not. If you've seen my Daylight Dreams shawl, it increases in multiple places, kind of like this. It's worked in a different stitch pattern, and so the similar style of increases, or the similar number, I guess, of increases, those just went straight down. Made for a different shape, and so it's got several points on it, and I didn't want that on this one. I wanted it nice and round, so I tried again. All right, so for this one I was getting really far away from my crescent shape, as you can see. I went with a similar idea from my last one because that was getting closer to a shape that I wanted, but I spread out. You can see this is my starting chain that I worked into to start on, and so this is much longer than the last one. You can see this one is so much shorter if it's inside of the other one. So I extended the starting chain, and then I did increases in a similar fashion where they're coming out from the middle here and out from the sides, and then increasing at the edges as well. And again, I was leaning closer to a shape that I liked, but you can see it's especially exaggerated right here. That shifting increase still creates this, like, I don't know, this little part almost looks like a foot with the heel and the toe. So that didn't work for me either. I did not care for that. So I tried again. All right, and this one is much bigger than a swatch because this is the shape I finally ended up with. I ended up with more increases at the end, and that created a curve edge. It straightens out as it gets bigger, but this end part still kind of curves around, which I love for the hug factor, that it just like really naturally wraps around your neck without a lot of zhuzhing and extra fabric. It just hugs really nicely. And then you'll see, what did I say at the beginning? I didn't want a big point. But I liked the shape of the increases coming down the center. And with, you'll see in the final Levana shawl, which I'll link below so that you can check out both my original pattern and check out the projects connected to the pattern, because I created a project. I ended up designing the shawl in a sport weight yarn, and then I wanted to try it in a fingering weight yarn. So you can see the design, and then you can see my modification and get notes if you want to modify it to a fingering weight yarn too. It was lots of fun. But the way I did the increases here and the way that I ended the shawl and blocked it. You could choose, if you wanted to block this to a more severe point, you could, but I chose to block it to more of a gentle swoop, and I absolutely love it. So I hope, I really, really hope that seeing all of my foibles and learning and trying again and frogging helps you, encourage you to be brave. If you have a sweater pattern that you're working on and it's just straight up and down and you'd like to have some waist shaping, play around with where you place the shaping, how you place the decreases, how you place some increases, because depending on the stitches that are used and depending on where you place them, how often you increase them, whether you stack them on top of each other or whether you shift them out from each other, that's going to change the shape of your final project. If you are finding that you're getting a bump like this, a couple just quick tips, and again, this will really depend on what kind of stitch you're using, but a couple quick tips to think about is stacking them straight on top of each other. You're more likely to get a point like this. And then increasing in the same spot in every row makes the shape more severe. So if you're finding you're getting, I made a sweater and I wanted to shape around the waist a little bit. And when I put my increases in, I was increasing every row stacked on top of each other just in two places. And I was getting, instead of my sweater being straight across the bottom, it was pointing at the ends. You know, it's like little points at each end, which looked very funny. So instead of increasing every round, I increased every couple of rounds, and instead of stacking them all on top of each other, I alternated back and forth between putting them on the sides and putting them more towards the center. So just all things to think about. I hope that, I know you couldn't swatch along with me on this one and that it was a bit of an intense journey, but I hope that this will encourage you to just work up a swatch, just a flat swatch, and then start doing some increases. Put all your increases in the middle and see what that shape gives you. Put all your increases on the outside and see what that shape gives you, or see what shape you get. Put increases every row versus every other row, and just play with it, because there's so much knowledge to be gained with playing with increases, and then do the same thing for decreases. Mine was a shawl shape, so it was all increasing, but the same can be done with playing with decreases too.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something. It is always my goal to help you grow confidently in your craft. And even though this wasn't maybe our most typical episode of Swatch and Learn, I hope it gave you some ideas of how different placements of shaping can affect the shape of your final project. This can be invaluable knowledge when working modifications in patterns, knowing how different stitches shape fabric differently. So I encourage you, even if you don't pick the same stitches I do, that you grab a stitch book maybe, or just take some simple stitches like double crochets or half double crochets and play around with increases and decreases and putting them on the edges versus putting them in the center of pieces, just to see what happens so that you have that knowledge tucked away for the future. Thank you again for joining me today. If you found this valuable, I would love it if you would subscribe and turn on notifications, like this video, and even share it with a friend who you think might find it helpful. I encourage you to check out the description for links to other videos that you might enjoy. Thank you again for joining me, and happy crafting!